Hi everybody, today we're going to talk about the multi-period binomial option pricing model. Multi-period binomial option pricing model. Okay, so as we went over last time, the single period binomial pricing model, we have a stock at S0. It either goes up to U times S0 or down to D times S0. And we're trying to price a call or a put option on this stock. On this stock. So in order to conserve generality, instead of like keeping a strike price or anything, we just say that this has a payout CU and CD. And the way we managed to actually price this option was by constructing a replicating portfolio which replicates the payout CU and CD of the option in both cases. And we determined that the price of an option based on this replicating portfolio is equal to 1 over R, where R is the interest rate, of Q times CU plus 1 minus Q CD, where Q is equal to U minus R over U minus D, and 1 minus Q is equal to R minus D over U minus D. Now we also showed that because of no arbitrage, that R has to be between D and U. Therefore, both of these probabilities are actually non-zero, which means that this Q forms a probability measure over the, the random variable or the state space of random variables. So that was also interesting. So basically, again, to reiterate, Q is a probability measure. It's a risk-neutral probability. So what does this mean? This means that we've sort of taken these future states, C1, CU, and CD, and we've sort of reevaluated them according to sort of more fairly based on what we can do at the same time based from a risk-neutral strategy. So while the probability originally might have been P and 1 minus P, we've sort of come up with a more equitable way of calculating the probability based on our ability to do these simple actions such as buy the stock and sell the stock to create the replicating portfolio. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So here in the multi-period binomial model, our stock is now spanning several periods. So here, again, I'm going to use numbers here for clarity. It's going to go up to 114 and then maybe up to 122. And then this will go down to 107, and this will go down to 100, and back to 107, and then like this. So you can see there are 3 time periods here, and 4 possible different ending states: 122, 107, 93.46, and then whatever this is. Okay. So how do we actually price a call option? So here we have a call option. We buy it at t equals 0. It expires at t equals 3 and has a strike price 100, let's say. So right here, this is the strike price. Okay, so we're going to basically treat each of these as a single period binomial model and work backwards. So what is the payout in this case? Well, in this case, CU equals 122 minus 100, so this will be 22. The payout in this case is CD is equal to 7. So according to the formula, the price of an option, assuming we're here, the price of an option expiring next period is equal to 1 over R multiplied by sort of Q. And notice because R, D, and U are all the same across all these different time periods, all the Q's are always the same. So here it's 1 over R multiplied by Q times 22 plus 1 minus Q times 7. Okay, that's the price of this here. And now we're going to repeat the same process. We're going to price this one, and then we're going to price this bottom one. And then now we can price this one based on the probabilities here. So we use this as input. So this is the price C here, and we use this as input to calculate this one. So that will be, again, is equal to 1 over R Q times, if this is C, C1, let's say, and then this is C2, then it'll be C1 plus 1 minus Q times C2. So this entire expression gets sort of plugged into there. So notice, if you continue with this whole process, you will end up with something like this, 1 over r to the third multiplied by, and so this is why it's sort of binomial and why it reminds us all of binomial. So if we think about it sort of logically, right, there will only be one term in this entire expression, assuming we do all this consolidation, that has this 22. There will be way more terms with a 7 and 93.4 that come from here and here than from the 122. It's sort of hard to explain, but you might understand how that might work out because of the binomial sort of distribution and how we're grouping terms together. So ultimately, and then the q's, so here we have 1q, right? But when we plug it in here, this becomes q squared, this one, and then this one becomes q times 1 minus q. The point I'm trying to make here is that inside this parentheses, we'll sort of have a binomial distribution sort of thing. Q to the third times 22 plus 3q squared, 1 minus q times 7, plus 3q times 1 minus q squared times, so the price of this option is 0, right, because it's gone below the strike price. That's the payout. And then this will be, 1 minus q to the third, also times 0. So that's the price of our option starting at time period 0. Okay. So also, I think another thing that's interesting, this will be mentioned later on as well, but the moment we hit one of these time periods, so between here and here, so we've chosen right here, remember we have a solution to our risk neutral probability, like the way we determine the risk neutral probability is by putting money into a cash account or buying some amount of stock. So we're making a decision here to put some amount of money X to buy some units of the stock X and put some money Y into the cash account, right? And then this will be the choice here, but then here we actually, based on what we know here now, our choices will actually be different, which is sort of interesting because it depends, right? It depends on S0, right? So the choice differs, but obviously the Q and the 1 minus Q, they do not differ. I think that's correct, yeah. Okay. So then the next thing I want to talk about is the sort of paradox that we alluded to last time. So here we have the stock S0, and it either goes up to, so it's at 100, it either goes up to 107 or down to 93.46. This time the probabilities are all crazy. So 99% up, 1% down, and then we have 1% up, 99% down, 0, 107, 93.46. And based off our option pricing theory, the price for these options is the same. Price of options is the same. And you might be wondering, how can this be that the price of these two options is the same when this one is clearly that much better? The answer is, at least the answer given, is that the probability of these options existing in the same economy is very low. So if you have a stock and it's originally priced at S0, and you know for a fact that it's going up to with a probability of 99% to 107, then I think you should definitely just borrow as much money as humanly possible and put it all into the stock, right? And definitely don't buy this one, right? And the moment nobody wants to buy this one, the price of this one should drop like a stone, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that I guess in a sort of no arbitrage economy, right, it's impossible for these probabilities P and 1 minus P to exist, which sort of, given that we assume that our economy is somewhat free of arbitrage, or as much as possible, right? What's interesting to note, I think, for me in my mind, the resulting theorem that we can come forth from that is that that all stocks have an equal chance of going up or down. I think that's more or less something which you can learn from that, or like based on the like if we are assuming equal option pricing. Okay. Um, I also want to talk about what happens if R goes up. How does the option price change? So we might think that the option price will actually go down, right? So if R goes up, what does this mean? This means the interest rate goes up. So therefore, if we get a payout in the future, the price of that payout will be less valuable, right? Because of the interest rate, right? However, actually the opposite happens. The option price actually goes up, okay? And so question mark, and then I'm gonna cross this out. So this is actually not true. And going back to our original equations, I'm going to try to come up with an explanation for this. So here we have this, and then we have this, ds of x plus ry is cd, where cu is greater than cd. Okay, so this, for example, will be equal to the value 10, perhaps, and this could, for example, equal to the value 0. So when r goes up, the term here increases. And notice it increases both for the good case and the bad case. So what does this mean? If you're trying to, like, let's just say you're trying to price an option and you're sort of trying to create the risk neutral portfolio, right? If R is higher, then this term is sort of higher. So in both cases, the good case and the bad case, you're sort of getting more money, right? So what does this mean? This means that this term has to sort of get, bigger in proportion, right? Because the output of this portfolio here, right, assuming that the stock goes down, this should be equal to 0, but this is big, so you need to sort of like outperform it in some sense. You need to, it's sort of bigger, so that I think possibly you need to like even borrow even more money and put yourself in bigger exposure to the interest rate in order to make sure that you still maintain this sort of option payout where one of them is 10 and the other is 0. And I think that could be a reasonable explanation for why the option price goes up. Okay, assuming you're the one that's trying to sort of price this risk neutral portfolio. Okay, finally, we're going to talk about this. So this is what we proved in this one arbitrage, in this one period binomial model, we proved that because there was no arbitrage, that d is less than r is less than u, and from there we derived risk neutral probabilities. We showed that there was a way to come up with risk neutral probabilities that recreate the option payout. Okay, it actually turns out that these two statements, no arbitrage, these two statements are equivalent. Okay, and I think, and this is called the first fundamental theorem of asset pricing. First fundamental theorem of asset pricing. And just to show you the backwards direction, so suppose there exists risk neutral probabilities Q. So here we have a bunch of payouts, right? A bunch of states here, omega 1, omega 2, all the way to omega m. And each of them have a payout associated with it, C1, C omega 1, C omega 2, C omega m. And also, we're given that there's a risk neutral probability associated with each of these. So again, what do we mean by risk neutral probability? We mean that there's a way to create a replicating portfolio which we can come up with these sort of probabilities, and then based on the probabilities of the replicating portfolio, just with no risk, it outputs these in various different states, right? Based off of these more correct probabilities, okay? So to prove that there's no arbitrage, I guess you have to consider the two types of arbitrage. And last time we sort of talked about this in a rough sense. So, and this very similarly follows the sort of discrete case of no arbitrage, but now we're talking about probabilistic, so it's slightly different. So in type A arbitrage, if the so we have a bunch of these states, right? It's sort of probabilistic. If all of the payouts are greater than or equal to 0 for all the states for all omega. Okay, that means that the price of the option, so the price should be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, and then type B arbitrage, if they're all equal to for all omega, and then for one of them it's greater than 0 for at least one, then the price of this should be greater than 0. Okay, so how can we, so let's try to prove that there's no type A arbitrage. Okay, so proof that there's no type A. Okay, so suppose C is greater than or equal to 0 for all omega, right? So the payouts are all non-zero, right? Then according to our option pricing theory, right, and given our risk neutral whatever, so the price of this option, right, should be equal to 1 over R multiplied by the number of periods, Rn, right, multiplied by the expectation according to this risk neutral probability of Cn, which is the payout, right? However, so all of these Q's, right, are sort of non-zero, right? So this means that the price of our option should be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so these Q's are all non-negative, right? And also non-zero. And then all of the payouts are greater than or equal to 0. Therefore, this proves that the price of our whole option, right, which is to the expected value, again, this is just like the Q times C1, or technically C of omega 1, so Q1 plus whatever, like that. So this is greater than or equal to 0, okay? So that's why there's no type A arbitrage, okay? And there's also no type B arbitrage, okay? So suppose C is greater than or equal to 0 for all omega, and then there is at least one omega where C is bigger than 0, right? And then according to the same logic, because there is a risk neutral probability, then the price of the option is equal to the payouts multiplied by the risk neutral probabilities, right? Q for each of these states, right? And since one of them is at least greater than 0, and the Q for that is greater than or equal to 0, then the price of the option should be greater than or equal to 0, right? So that proves that there is no type A and no type B arbitrage, which sort of proves our statement here in this direction. Okay, so then there's no proof for the second direction, maybe in the future. Thanks so much. See you next time.